Sherman acted alone. Henry Halleck, who was the overall commander, would be more like a chief of staff back in Washington, D.C., organizing the incredible task of all the supplies, which, as war gets more modern, equipment becomes more important, and industrial goods become more important. Whoever's doing supply might be the most important person in a war. Yeah.
So Grant said Sherman to take the West. What was he doing?
Sherman's using the Army of the West to take Atlanta.
Oh, okay.
And I know Atlanta doesn't seem like the West, but it was the same soldiers that fought like at Vicksburg, the same armies, and then Chattanooga, Chickamauga. Yeah.
So I'm confused. So you say Grant trusted Sherman, but his headquarters were with Meade?
Yeah. So he figured Sherman could act alone, but he wanted to make sure that Meade. There was a kind of this thing where the Army of the Potomac, because it was the most important army, they were reluctant to attack. Remember how slow McClellan was? And so Grant wanted to make sure that Meade always stayed on the attack. Who Meade was a good general, but maybe not as aggressive.
Okay, so like, are they like just like they're doing the same thing?
Well, Meade is here. He's going to move towards here to destroy Lee's army. Sherman's here.
Oh.
And there were 3 other attacks to try to stretch out the Confederate army, but for the most part, these are the two important ones. In fact, the other 3 failed miserably. And so let's start in the West, or the East. I'm sorry. Meade had about just a little bit over 100,000 men. Lee had less than 65,000, and they were literally out of men. Especially after Gettysburg, they had lost so many men. They were scraping the bottom of the barrel. Younger and younger, older men were being used. A lot of men that were invalids, meaning they had been wounded or too ill to fight, were being drafted and put into rear guard units so they could use every man possible. The Confederates are literally out of men. Remember, there's only 5,000 whites in the South. That means, men of fighting age, well less than 2 million. They're running out of soldiers. They're in real trouble. But they can hold out, and that's all they got to do. And so, first thing, here's Fredericksburg. So the same battlefields. I guess if you want to see all these, it's kind of nice because they're right there. Here's Fredericksburg. There's Chancellorsville, the Rappahannock, the Rapidian. This time, Meade's army's up here. Lee's here. As soon as the spring rains in, Meade tries to get through the wilderness. Remember that forest? And Lee, knowing that if he gets out of the forest, Meade's numbers will really be, you're able to use them and spread out his army. Lee attacks him while marching through the forest, and the first big battle is going to be called the Wilderness. And it's going to be kind of basically about 2.5 days of real fighting. May 8th, probably the biggest day of the fighting. Here's a painting of it. And there was a cavalry encounter that in the forest. And you can imagine, horses, cavalrymen fighting between trees just a few yards apart. Really bloody fight. The men who fought there said this was one of the worst. And they've been to Gettysburg or Antietam. And this map doesn't show everything as good as I hoped. There was a road right here. And this green is now where the National Park Service owns as part of the memorial. This blue in areas they want to develop. This is from the Civil War Trust. They actually want to make a Walmart right next to the battlefield. Right now, that has been halted to build a Walmart on hollowed ground. My guess is in the next couple of years, it's going to be a free-for-all. So, yeah, it's going to be built. They want to build a Disneyland on the Bull Run battlefield. And yeah, that's probably going to happen now. Which I think is sacrilegious. But anyways, here, Union forces counterattacked and almost split Lee's army apart. In fact, Lee would rally the troops and wanted to lead Texas into the fight at the front, going to be waving his sword, and Texans literally pulled Lee off the horse. So he would not lead them in the fight because they figured that was suicidal to save his life. And so, giving an idea of the fighting, in fact, his best general, Longstreet, was hurt. Down here, the Confederates counterattacked the strung-out Union line in the march, and they almost broke through. This was a really chaotic battle. At the end of the day, both lines were kind of strung out along this road right here. Well, the night of the 7th, that's what men remembered the most. Because, think about exploding black powder, it started a fire. Remember that sketch artist, that wall they talked about in the movie Civil War I about Gettysburg? That's one of his sketches. And here they are taking men out of the forest in kind of a makeshift stretcher as the fire advanced on them. Because that is the one that men would have nightmares for the rest of their life, those who survived. So the fire began in the forest, and there were thousands of wounded men. Some could crawl out, but most couldn't. And they would scream in terror, as you could only imagine, as the fire advanced. It's kind of one of those slow fires that move, which made it even more terrifying. They were able to save some, but hundreds would be burned to death out there, or asphyxiated because of the smoke. And that's what they remember about this horrible fight. By the end of the 8th, it looked like another Confederate victory. Now, once again, I just tell you numbers to give you an idea of the bloodshed. But there is going to be, in fact, it's kind of shocking when you get right down to it, another 24,000 casualties. About 17,000 of them were Union. It looked like a Confederate victory. In fact, remember how we've done this? Now, we fought a battle, boom, battle, and then there would be a little bit of a delay, then fight another battle, then a delay or a few months. And so, after this battle, Union forces of the Army of the Potomac thought we lost again. Grant's here, he can't beat Lee either. You know, the Western armies talk tough. Sedgwick's Corps right here. I'm just telling you the story, you get an idea of what the attitude of the Army. They're the first one to be pulled out of line. They begin marching down the Orange Turnpike. If they go left, that means they're going north, back into camp. 3 months later, they'll do it all over again. But it'll be 3 months later. So then we get to kind of what they're getting at here. But if they get to this and turn right, that means they're going around Lee's line. And that means what's going to happen in a day or two? Another battle. We're going to try to get around him, and Lee won't allow it. So another battle. In a day, another wilderness maybe. So think about the night. It's pitch black. It's gloomy forest. Can't see much. There's just a couple torches to mark the route. And so kind of get an idea of what it feels like. So it's that kind of one of those really just pretty awful nights. Just lost another battle. A lot of men they knew were gone. They get to here, and there's a member of Meade's staff. Meade's the commander of the Army of the Potomac. Actually, Meade and Grant are on horseback right there watching this. The first men get to there, and they know exactly what it means. And they assume, we're going north. Instead, Meade's staff member just points with his thumb. We're going south. We're going to fight again in a day, maybe two. Another one like the wilderness. How do you think the men reacted? They started cheering and throwing their hat up. And it rippled all the way to the Army of the Potomac. They had to run down the line and tell them to shut up so the Confederates could hear them. They were overjoyed, and their big cheer was huzzah for the Union Army. So they were huzzahing Grant. We're going to finish the war. They wanted to go home. Yeah, we might fight and die, but if we win the battle, we might win the war. And we can go home. Grant became that general that Lee or that Lincoln wanted. Win the war. Lee is running out of men. You keep the pressure up, he can't keep fighting. And so he ordered Meade to move this way. Now, one of the important things though, yeah, Lee lost a lot of men. Harder and harder to replace it. But the defense has a big advantage. Remember I said they have to hold out. Well, the United States would take advantage of what's called interior lines in the Revolutionary War. Lee would take advantage of it in this war. Heck, Meade had this advantage at Gettysburg. Interior lines of communication. It's one of the reasons why armies on the defensive have such a huge advantage. And so the Germans would use it in World War I and World War II. Interior lines, so even armies that are outnumbered, low on supplies, always have this advantage. But the only way to really understand this is I have to draw you a map of the Confederacy. Now I know all of you like, some are like, yes, another map. Some of you like, God, he's showing off his cartography skills. Well, a little bit, yeah, I mean, I'm proud of him.
So what's the interior line?
This is a defensive strategy. It's basically an advantage for the defense. It's called interior lines of communication. So would you like me to draw the map of the Confederacy real fast? Okay, I'm going to take you to the entire Confederacy. Okay. That's pretty good, huh? Yeah, I didn't trace it. I just drew it. Here's Richmond. Here's Washington, D.C. So just imagine, here's the Union Army attacking. Lee meets them, battle, draw, like the Wilderness. So the Union Army says, okay, let's find another place to attack. And so they think, let's go to this spot right here. You see what they have to do to get to that spot? They have to pull out of the line and go around. What does Lee have to do? You see it? Right. Armies on the defensive have the advantage of interior lines, meaning that if they're well led, they can beat the attacker to the spot. Now, of course, they can make mistakes, problems could happen, but that's interior lines. So if you know anything about, especially, how Germany was able to survive so long in 44 or 45, or even Japan, when their supply situation was pretty much nil. They're done in 1944, but they held out because of interior lines. And the other issue about interior lines, okay, another draw. They go here, another draw, here, another draw. Look at the supply lines. The Union supply lines got to go way over here, shorter supply lines. That's part of interior lines. It's a huge advantage. So if you wonder, well, how do you do it? And as you need more supplies with modern armies, interior lines become even more important. If you know anything about the Pacific War, 1940, or World War II, especially 44, and the vast distances the America had to go, you realize the issue of supply and interior lines. So the race is on to a new road junction. If Lee beats him, he can cut off the advance. If Meade wins, Lee has to go into retreat. The next big road junction, where's my mouse? It's right about here, but it's, everybody write down, Spotsylvania. And who lives in Spotsylvania? In fact, that's one of the problems of fighting a battle in Spotsylvania. What is that big problem? Blood-sucking vampires. Dracula lives in Spotsylvania, right? I can never remember, but it's a Vania, and that's all that matters. And what's the big problem with vampires? Vampires know no loyalty. You can't trust a vampire, can you? Just can't trust them. Write that down as a tip for life. Cannibalism, bad, don't trust vampires. I know what you're thinking, but yeah, you know what they like. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Spotsylvania. Lee's forces beat them there by 12 hours. They dug trenches, and soon the battle hatches, there's only be a couple days of real fighting as both sides receive reinforcements. The 12th will be the biggest day. And this is a pretty generic shot of the fighting. Pretty heavily forested, but they dug trenches in a good area. Before we get to that, though, General Sedgwick, that Union commander, they called him Uncle John. They loved him. Not like a brilliant commander, but just a good general. He was very important, like at Gettysburg. His corps was the first one. And they were about 350 yards away from these new Confederate lines. Confederate snipers were taking pot shots at them. Now, 300 yards away with a black powder musket. How do you have to aim a black powder musket from 300 yards? It's almost like that, isn't it? You have to kind of lob shells. And so they're not very accurate from that far. A couple bullets right in the dirt. And his staff officers were ducking. And Sedgwick was very brave, kind of disgusted, And he rode up and looked at them and said, "Men, there's nothing to fear. They couldn't hit an elephant at this distance." Right here. That should give you an idea how bad this battle is going to be. Sedgwick went down like that. Yeah. I mean, obviously for him, a very unlucky shot, but it hit him from 300 yards right there before. Replaced by one. And so, the Confederates dug trenches. They're really, it's actually a really pretty area, If you want to walk along the trench line, I would advise you to bring water. And, yeah, I found that out. Oh, let's take a walk on it. Next thing you know, I'm just including the wind chill, I would say 1,000 degrees. Well, as Meade looked for ways to attack, this area right here where there was just a small clearing, some areas as much as 100 yards between where the Union forces were, actually 100 yards of open territory to where the forest was, where the Confederate trenches were. Now think about what the Confederates did. Now they know. They used to mock Lee for making them big trenches. Now they stop, they start digging. Who cares how hard it is? That's how you stay alive. They would dig about a 4-foot hole, then pile the dirt up in front, and then use logs or anything else to prop up there. So your line would be kind of a mound and then a trench. Pretty quick way to dig a defensive line. Long term, we want to go deeper, but short. That's what they had. So you had this here, so they'd be pretty well protected up to here. And then most areas had up to almost 100 yards of clearing. But in one spot, there was only about maybe 40 yards. The forest came up, and then just 40 yards. Remember all the attacks I've shown you. You've seen them. Gettysburg. You got a line, and what do they do? They line up in their lines and march forward, and it's a slaughter, isn't it? They're still doing the same tactics they did with weapons that were inaccurate. Now they're using, well, Emory Upton, this major from New York, a regimental commander from a very wealthy family, the New York Uptons. He came up with a plan. What if we don't line up that way? What if I take my regiment of nearly 400 men and line them up like this? 2 lines of almost 200 guys. They would creep up right to the edge of the forest. No preliminary bombardment. Just a quick bugle call. They'd all stand up and run full speed up the Confederate line. Their orders would be fixed bayonets. Don't even load their weapons, so they don't stop and fire. Just run full speed. 40 yards, how fast can you run 40 yards? Me, maybe 3.9. That was my best time uphill. And maybe somebody was shooting at me. Yeah.
Is Emory Upton, is that
Union.
Union?
And the plan was they would charge full speed, get to the Confederate line, this would turn this way, this wing would turn this way, and just run down the line with their bayonets. People don't like to be stuck with bayonets. That's another helpful tip for life. And so, sounds like a pretty good idea, doesn't it? What's the first thing you need if you're Upton? He was given permission to do this by his corps commander, Warren. You might want to guess? You got to find 2 lunatics to lead it. Because everyone's going to be shooting at the first 2 guys. And you know what? There's always somebody. In fact, I'm looking in here. Which one in you in here would say, yeah, pick me! Thank you for volunteering list. Anybody else? The amazing thing is when they did it at noon, literally just quick bugle call, they all stood up and ran. The first guys went hit. They were so surprised they didn't hit him. And it worked. They got to the trenches and the Confederates were so shocked they took off running. They cleared out a 100-foot trench. The only problem was nobody thought it would work. No reinforcements came and they had to retreat. Meade heard about this. And now General Upton, he was promoted, would get 4,000 men in a brigade. And they would attack right here. You notice how the Confederate line makes this kind of angle? Because there was a road junction right here. And his plan was 4 lines of 1,000. The first guys would go here and clear out the trench. The middle lanes would go right through the middle and attack. Right to the rear of the Confederate lines. They had to go over a little bit longer land, a little bit longer clearing, and they needed 4 lunatics now, which they had no trouble finding. But this is amazing. They had to go nearly 100 yards of open terrain. The first 5 guys in each line were hit. The Confederates were so surprised that they just kind of fired at the rear guys, and those guys came scot-free. And then they're going to have 16,000 men in a corps under, remember Winfield Scott Hancock, the guy who held the Union Center at Gettysburg? He was wounded. He will run for president in 1880. That we'll get to later. Almost went. Almost. We almost had President Hancock. He was going to reinforce this with 16,000 men, get into the Confederate rear, and that could be the big victory. They might actually do it. So the plan was to go, quick bugle call. They came charging out of the forest. And I was just imagining those guys. I guess all you can do is just kind of yell and go. Also, the other thing is you'd be like, if you're like the first guy, you think, that guy behind me better not trip and fall with his bayonet. So they all stood up and running full speed. It worked again. They cleared out this trench line. 1,000 Union soldiers broke into the rear. It looked like it's going to work perfectly. A few Confederate reinforcements slowed them up, but if Hancock arrived right then, they could win the war. The only problem was this. They got lost. They could hear the shooting. They're going around back there. They get around a ridge, thinking it's there. No, it's another ridge. They were lost for 2 hours. By the time they got there, Lee had personally led a counterattack, pushed them back, and thus began, well, it's hard to say. The men who were there said this is the worst of their dreams. They called that angle in the line the bloody angle. The fighting went back and forth over that mound of dirt that they dug for their trench lines. Soon it started to rain, and rained hard, and everything turned into a quagmire. And they just kept fighting. Pretty soon it devolved into thousands of men pressing against this mound, about 4.5 feet high, pressing against, kind of hunched down. Wounded men, if they couldn't crawl away, they were stepped on, a lot of them drowned in the mud. They couldn't get out of it rain. Those who died just piled up, pushed into that mound. Pretty soon they're handing men in front, you think about dumping rain. They're being handed loaded muskets, and they would fire into the face, kind of slash. They kind of hand it back, and someone would hand them another one, so they were wounded or just couldn't take it anymore. This went on for 20 hours. In one 100-foot stretch of the trench line, there were 500 bodies after the battle. In one spot, there was a 22-inch oak tree. Now, oak is hard wood. Just musket balls, not a cannon. Musket balls shot that tree down. Cut it in two. The stump is in the Smithsonian Museum of American History. And so you can go and look at the stump. In fact, it's right next to, remember I told you about Sheridan's big horse? It's right next to it. And the first time I went there, this was a long time ago, and I took a picture with a 35mm camera. You're using 35mm film, pre-digital cameras. And those actually took better, more, they're actually nicer pictures than digital cameras. But there's a couple big problems. You gotta get developed, they're more expensive, and you don't have any idea if you took a good picture or not. And so you gotta use a flash. There's a glass case. So you want to get, if you ever take a picture of anything in a glass case with a flash, you want to get like an angle. You know what I'm talking about? So the flash bounces away from you. I took 2 pictures, but I had no idea if the pictures were any good till I got home. When I got home, the 2 pictures, one was just simply a flash, and the other one was a small flash of a picture of me, taking a picture of me, off into infinity, with not even any sign of the stump. I should bring that picture. This is the stump when it came out the next time, the picture I took. This one turned out really well. And I'll pass this around, but if you look at it, you can see gray spots in it. Those are mini holes. Still embedded in the tree. And it's about that big. If it could do that to a tree, what would that do to a human body? There were 1,000 unknown soldiers in Spotsylvania just from the bloody ankle battle. Yeah.
How many times did the tree shot?
Well, that tree had to be shot. Oh, it had to be shot hundreds of times.
Yeah, so one musket ball is good.
Yeah, but remember, bodies are piled up on top of each other, musket balls are flying, canisters flying. Yeah.
So was Buddy Angle still
Spotsylvania. Yeah. And Lee would pull back and leave this ruin there. If you get a chance to go to the Smithsonian Museum is great for a lot of reasons, but yeah, that sign there. It's a little bit, you just can't, you look at the sign like, wow, but what you mean the Smithsonian? Well, after that battle, to just give you an idea about the numbers here, we're talking another 27,000 men, 15,000 units. Once again, you don't need to know the numbers. The point is, just get an idea, look at the casualties. Doesn't really look like anybody won that battle. It's pretty close, but Lee can no longer afford these losses. The next bit, Grant would order Meade to go to here. This one didn't. Meade realized this is not a good place to attack. There was a short fight, and then another advance. And this is the one we have to get right here, Cold Harbor. Cold Harbor, just a little tiny town, now it's part of Richmond. And you'll notice something. Yeah, Lee beat them by 6 hours, and basically improved on trenches that were already there from 1862. Look how close they are to Richmond now. So they're advancing, but the supply line's getting longer. Well, Cold Harbor reminded everybody of Gettysburg, but even more. There was a trench line behind a thick wooden fence. So it was a great defense line. As you pile up more dirt against that fence, and you have basically a fort, and then a mile of pasture land in front of the Confederate lines. But Grant thought, Lee has lost so many men. He just got 20,000 more reinforcements. Let's attack. The problem is a mile, we can't do what Upton did here. It's too long to run. Anybody want to guess how they attacked? Huh? They lined up like they did before and marched out. They thought they could overwhelm them with a massive attack. Thus, the Battle of Cold Harbor will be June 1st, 1864. You know, it's a little bit less than a month from when the Wilderness started. This sketch of it, you can see the Confederate lines and the Union soldiers lined up. Now, this would be Baldy Smith's Corps. We'll come back to that later. But eliminating the Union soldiers, many of them, they had been at somewhere in Gettysburg, in Fredericksburg, but they were also at the Wilderness. They were at the Bloody Angle, and they looked at this. The night before, thousands of Union soldiers, especially after seeing what happened to the bodies at the Bloody Angle, took little pieces of paper wrote their name, their unit, hometown, and family members' names, and pinned it to the back of their uniform because they didn't want to be one of the thousands unknown. They wanted their family to know who they are. Yeah, they would actually start using what we call dog tags in World War II. They were using some of those by then, but they had to make them themselves. World War I, near the end of the war, became standard now and standard. It's for that reason, because high explosives don't leave nice bodies. They want to identify. Yeah.
But if it was a piece of paper, what happens if it like got soaked or something?
That's what he got. He used what he got. They didn't have anything else. But yeah, there's obviously, And so the plan was they would attack at 1 o'clock. And it sounded just like those Fredericksburg, Gettysburg. They marched across that open field again. And the plan was that they got to the Confederate trenches, they would send more reinforcements. But Meade's staff was waiting for more reinforcements. So when they attacked, we've already seen this battle before. In 20 minutes, 7,000 Union soldiers went down. 20 minutes. I mean, that's hard to even comprehend. Now remember, that's pre-high explosives. There's no machine guns. There's no heavy artillery. Just black powder. 7,000 men went down. Yet, someone on Meade's staff claimed that he saw Union troops take the trench lines, which didn't happen, so they poured more men. The slaughter would go on for 5 hours. On the body of one of the men, when they finally, 2 days afterwards, started digging the dead after, which I didn't even want to think about how awful that must have been. On the body of one of the men. Remember, this is a different era. Most of these men were diary writers. They would write in their diary. In the last entry of this diary, was a man they found, Union soldier found dead on the battlefield. June 1st, 1864. Today I died at Cold Harbor. They had no illusions. Yeah, the generals, and they always do in every war. Read about World War I. Always have illusions about what the men can do, what the humans are capable of. They couldn't do it. Another 12,000 down. The casualties are getting outrageous. But get this. This is one I do want you to get. In a month of fighting, both sides suffered over 90,000 casualties. Think about that for a second. The Confederates had 35,000. So you look at just pure numbers, look at the Union didn't do as well. But where's Lee going to get his forces? They're scraping every man from every place. He's down to less than 50,000 men. They are literally out of men. And this is where we get to a concept called, because of those numbers, look at the numbers, how many dead. No big victories, but Lee can't fight much longer. This is what we call attrition. I need more of these big markers. Attrition. Attrition means killing, maiming, wounding, so many of the enemy that they can no longer fight. You heard terms like grinding them down. I mean, it literally means, or bleeding them white is a pretty common one. Kill so many that they can't fight anymore. Every general wants to fight a war where they win the big victory with their tactical maneuvers. No, that doesn't happen. It's just killing until the war ends. Yeah.
Is that what happened in the Eastern Front?
Oh, yeah. In fact, World War II was a war of attrition. World War I was attrition. Yeah. There was a couple big victories, but there weren't any decisive victories at the end of the war. Yeah, just German army lost so many men. But they held out, they outnumbered us from your line. That's how we win wars today. Or lose them. And there's something very important to get out of this. We're talking attrition. So there's not any big military victory that ends war. What it is, we're talking a political decision. This is politics. Anybody who thinks war is not politics does not understand war. And anybody who says leave war to the generals do not understand what they're talking about. Or they're basically trying to justify doing horrible things. Eventually you lose so many men you can't fight anymore. It could be surrendering, but in the United States, for example, in the Vietnam War, we lost too many men. It wasn't worth the fight. We left. They won. That's why. And the numbers are different for every war. Eventually we reach that point where we've had too much suffering. We've paid too much of a price. It's too awful. We're done. We left Iraq in 2008. Why? We're done. We're done. That was attrition. That's how wars are fought today. It's pretty horrible, isn't it? Don't forget this word attrition. But that's what the war's gonna be fought. But Grant had one more idea. Here's where I write attrition. I forgot I did this. Attrition. Here's Grant. And he's looking over the shoulder. Actually, you can't see him. It's kind of almost like a double face. That's Meade sitting on a bench. Actually, they took pews out of the church and drug him out with a staff. And Grant is pointing at something. And the thing about that is those kind of pictures aren't ever taken. That's a really rare thing. So that's a cool picture from 1864. But it's right after Cold Harbor. So that very well could be planning. Grant has explained to Meade the good idea he has. And the idea is this. I like this picture a lot. See people moving, a little bit of fuzz. I like this guy looking back at the camera with this pipe. I don't know. I think that's cool. Well, here they are, Cold Harbor. What the plan was, and just listen to the plan, then I'll tell you, you have to get one city down. Meade would fake an attack here. And what's Lee going to do? Go down, dig trenches, right? That's what he always did. But most of the men would cross the James River, and this is what we have to get. Attack the important railway city of Petersburg. If the Confederates lose Petersburg, they can no longer supply Richmond. A panicky retreat would follow, and that's when you beat them. And actually, that's kind of what's going to happen. It's going to be 9 months down the road. And it worked. Fake the attack. Lee was there. It worked perfectly. They built the longest pontoon bridge in American history up to that time over the James River, a mile wide. There it is. And then went to Petersburg. At Petersburg, slaves had dug trenches around this important city years ago. And this is actually after the battle, but look at those trenches. They wound all the way around. Not only trenches, but they had these. Cheval de Frise. You didn't know this, I just want to show you this. Because they would make these, this is pre-barbed wire. Think about those, how good those would be. You put a bunch of those out. Now this, maybe you didn't know this, but people don't actually like to be impaled on sticks. They look at that and say, no, I'm going to not run into pointed sticks. And so what do? I'm running, pointed sticks. I'm going to turn. So you put a bunch of those there and then leave one open spot. So you funnel everybody to an opening. What do you have there?
You have a line.
Yeah. Or a cannon with canister. Right? In World War I, they used barbed wire. And they have machine guns. They still use the same thing exactly today. You funnel them into one spot. So it hasn't really changed much, just different technology. But those actually look pretty daunting. And even when you blow them up, you still got sticks sticking all over. And so that's the same thing. What? they're like this far apart.
How tall are those?
How tall?
Let's get under them.
So it's pretty good defensive line. Well, gotta remember, people are shooting at you.
Oh,
But so the commander, there were only though 3,000 Confederate soldiers there, and these were what they called invalids or stomach soldiers. They'd been wounded in the stomach or had some kind of other stomach issue. They couldn't march. Only 3,000 of them. They really couldn't fight. 16,000 Union troops. The problem was it was the same corps that attacked at Cold Harbor. When their commander, General Albee Smith, yeah, I wonder where I got that name, saw this, he didn't think I should overwhelm them, I should attack now according to orders. He thought another Cold Harbor. He delayed 18 hours. By the time Meade found out and ordered him to attack, he was just furious. Anybody want to guess what happened in those 18 hours? He arrived with the reinforcements, and it was a slaughter. Another golden opportunity. But by then, both sides were exhausted, and it devolved into siege warfare. The Siege of Petersburg. And the Siege of Petersburg would go on for 9 months. 9 months this would go on. All the way from June 64 to April 65. Meade and Grant didn't have enough men to totally surround Petersburg, but the Confederates couldn't push them out. Soon, trench lines would develop, secondary trenches, some as anywhere from 40 to 100 yards apart. There would be attacks across between trench lines, and they would be a slaughter for both sides, especially for the North. In fact, they would get a name for the area between the trenches during the Siege of Petersburg. The name would go on to World War I. That's where no man's land comes from. Both sides would build these pretty elaborate cupolas for snipers, and if you stuck your head up in those trench lines, you're dead. In fact, one of the most popular things for the men in the trenches, can you imagine how boring and miserable it would be in the trenches? Not only for the typical tear, but think about if it rained. Think if it rained. Where are your latrines? Got flooded every single time. Just hell. They're just bored out of their skulls, so they would put hats on a bayonet, hold them up, and like bet how many bullet holes would be in there in like 10 seconds. Needless to say, this was a tough thing, but stalemate. Yeah.
So what days was it from June?
June to April. So June 64, April 65. 9 months of this. Well, if you couldn't go over, a regiment from Pennsylvania, who were made up of mostly hard rock coal miners, went to their corps commander, eventually got to them and said, hey, can we dig under? Which is as old as war has ever been. And their corps commander, a guy you might remember, one of the 4 people you can dress up as, Ambrose Burnside, his back, said, what the heck, it's better to have a guy shoot at your hats. So they began to dig a tunnel between the lines, under the Union line, under no man's land, and then under the Confederate lines. Then when they got there, their plan was to go 50 feet in either direction, roll as many barrels of gunpowder as they can. Actually, what they thought would happen was this. They'd ignite the gunpowder. This is what their plan was. It wouldn't actually blow up because gunpowder is not explosive per se, but it would create a shockwave, and that would knock out the Confederates. Not a bad idea, right? An attack right there. They tried something like that at Vicksburg, and so they began to dig. Burnside realized after about 2 weeks, this might work. He told Meade, and Meade is like, yeah, this is great, something. And so the plan they would do it would be September 16, 1864. And did I say September?
Yeah.
I meant to say July.
What? Where'd you get September from?
I have no, yeah, I think I was thinking 7. I don't know.
Wait, what?
It's July 7th, 16. All right, so back to this. Hey, just come on. A fresh division of 6,000 men under a general by the name of Ferraro, who was a well-known abolitionist, of determined soldiers. These are what they call it. This is what they call a colored division. Black soldiers, desperate to fight. Perfect. The plan was they would crawl out at night into no man's land, lay flat against the ground, Every morning, like clockwork, the Union guns would shell the Confederates. The Confederates would go into their shelters. They're called bomb proofs. Then after about 10 minutes of shelling, they come out of their bomb proofs and cook breakfast. That was the norm. I mean, they call it live and let live. We're going to shell now, but we'll let you come out. We don't want to kill you while you're eating breakfast, right? Every day that happened. So when do you explode the gunpowder?
They're eating breakfast.
While they're eating breakfast. And so they took the dirt out. I like this one. Rolled the barrels of gunpowder in. They were taking the dirt out. They had to do it at night so the Confederate spies couldn't see it. Here they are rolling the gunpowder. They built a 4x4 tunnel, then out both directions, 50 feet. Does everyone get an image of this? The night before, Meade changes his mind. He replaces Ferrero's division of soldiers who hadn't fought. They weren't at the bloody angle, so they might not know what they're getting into, with a division half its size of white soldiers under General Robert Leadley. And Leadley men had been at Wilderness, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor. And they weren't told about the bomb, the gunpowder, which they called a mine. They weren't told about that. They were just simply told, at sunup, you're going to attack the Confederate lines. Good luck. They had no idea. Now, a lot of people believe that Meade, in fact, I just read something where they mentioned this attack, where they took Ferrero's black soldiers out, and people believe that Meade didn't think black soldiers could fight. A kind of a racist attitude. That's not it at all. A lot of people were saying that the Union Army would purposely put black soldiers into areas where they would be mowed down and slaughtered. Remember that whole thing about making the country a white republic? That would get rid of blacks for after the war. It's horrible. Meade was worried he'd be accused of that being slaughtered. Mistake. Leadley was so distraught by this that he didn't go out with his men. He went into one of the bomb proofs and proceeded to drink as much whiskey as he could drink. He couldn't take it. So, the next morning, the shelling, there's a fuse, lit the fuse, it's about 150 feet long fuse. Now you know what's going to happen, right? What happened? The fuse went halfway and stopped. So they needed a fast, relatively short, and crazy volunteer to run out there with a match, light it, and go. Because the tunnel's only 4 feet tall. They found a sergeant to do it. He lit and takes off running. So, fuse is gone. You leave these troops out there thinking, you have no idea what's coming. Confederates are cooking breakfast, right? Right when he gets to the mouth of the tunnel. Remember the explosion was going to be like a muffled explosion? Anybody want to guess what happened?
Big.
Boom! The entire Confederate line blew up. A massive explosion. Everything flew up in the air. And we're talking the men, horses, equipment, wood, everything up in the air. James is overjoyed by this.
That's awesome.
In fact, the guy was running out the tunnel. He got right to the exit of the tunnel, and the shock wave blew him over a sandbag little thing they had, and he landed 150 feet later, kind of bounced around the ground like a walk up. Then a jet of fire followed him. Leave these men. Well, before you get to that, think about everything blown up. Well, at this Confederate line, there was this little, in one of the trenches, little circle of Confederates, a slave was cooking the breakfast. Boom, they're gone. Explode up in the air. A mile away behind the Union line. This is actually behind the trenches. There's a group of men sitting around a campfire. The explosion happened. They had no idea. Stuff's falling on them like this, going like this. And all of a sudden they saw something vaguely familiar coming through the sky. This is their story. All of a sudden, literally landing on his feet in between them was that slave. And they both just they were like, and everyone's like, wow! They did. They took him to a tent. And they would charge a dime to see the flying man after the battle. But, yeah, he landed. On his feet.
I don't believe this.
You don't believe this? Were you there?
Were you?
Possibly. Have you ever heard of this before? Yeah, that's what they said. He landed on his feet. Well, Leadley's men were shocked. They You mean, think about it. They're like, bruh. They had no idea. And they got up and they came up to a 120 by 60 by 20 foot crater. That's the Battle of the Crater. Bell rang, and because Liz was too cynical, you're not going to hear the rest of the story. Sorry. Remind me where I finished. I will finish the story.
Just before the